to Open Mic on Giant TV with your host, Mike Balsam. On this show, we talk politics, people, and the issues affecting the approximately 447,000 residents of Niagara. On today's program, we talk poverty issues in the Niagara region. Joining me today, we have two guests. First off, I have Sarah Protula to my right. She's a director at Community Crew, a charitable organization helping to provide lunches and school supplies, and among other programs, to school-age children across Niagara. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. And Glen Walker is in the studio as well, chair of the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network, executive director of Positive Living Niagara, and also co-chair of the Overdose Protection Network Niagara. Busy man, Glen.
Very busy, but all our work does tie together, and I think for us, it's important to be there and to be at the table and make a change here in the region.
When I look at those three agencies, you're right. All of these things do focus on poverty-related issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of our clients that we support at Positively are living in poverty. Certainly within our overdose prevention network, so many people with addictions are living in poverty as well. So that need is really strong. And certainly in this region, we have some major issues around addictions and, of course, our poverty issue in general.
Why do you think poverty all of a sudden has been a focus when it really hasn't? It's sort of been pushed to the side for many years. People have not been focusing on it. Politicians have not been focusing on it. But it seems to have become much more of a focus, much more out in the open in the last 2 years.
I think we have seen an increased interest. I think on a federal political level, with the Liberal government coming in, we saw a major change in terms of just a development of a poverty reduction strategy for the country. Many people have been asking for that for years and years and years, and we didn't have one. So, yeah, I think we have had momentum growing, lots of groups and people speaking up saying we need to address this, we need to address this. And finally, I think our politicians had listened, and we are getting traction on this. So it is really nice to see.
Some of the statistics we'll get to a little bit later on, but amongst the statistics, I think it's something like 15% of those living in poverty are children. And Sarah, that must be something that's near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, so our program focuses on providing a healthy lunch to kids in need. So we work in schools across Niagara that provide or who live in a lower income area typically. And we know that when we go into these schools, it's usually 25% or more of the population of parents or guardians who live under the poverty line or make less than the living wage. And so we know that these kids struggle, and sometimes they'll come to school with nothing or things like a can of pop. And so they'll make access out of their breakfast, make use out of their breakfast program. And then sometimes our lunch will be the only meal that they have for the rest of the day until they return to school for breakfast again the next day.
You have cooperation with both school boards, the Niagara Catholic
so we work in the Niagara
DSBN?
Catholic and the DSBN, which is really exciting for us. It's great to be able to serve both boards. But I think with us, we're working in 7 schools and we feed about 550 kids every week, but it's growing. So our wait list has about 10 additional schools, and it continues to grow every single day of teachers who hear about us and our program and say, how can we get on board? And how can you help us just provide a little extra food for kids? Because I think not all kids have it the same. There's, even in our children's school, there's tons of kids who are different levels of poverty in the way that they live, or, some may not even know what poverty is. But when you're feeding a child and you're making sure that they have access to healthy food, you're helping to level the playing field a little bit more for them.
How does the program work? So let's say we've got a school and there's 25 kids in that particular school that need your services. How does it work?
So we go into the schools and we work closely with the principals or the teachers who run the lunch programs. And we just say, can you identify the children to us that need a little bit of extra support? So we don't ask any questions. We don't say show us your income statements. We just say, you know what, we're here to serve. How many kids need the program? Because you see them every single day. Identify the ones that don't bring a lunch, or maybe mom and dad are struggling. Maybe there's a death or a mental illness or something, or maybe they're just new to this country and they just need a little bit of extra help. So we ask the teachers and principals to identify to us, and then we go in each week and provide them with a healthy lunch.
And that lunch is prepared centrally at one location and then shipped out? Yeah,
so we work out of Central Community Church, and we have a health certified kitchen there. All of our volunteers are safe food handling certified, so they prepare all the lunches for us. And then we have delivery teams that go out and give out the lunches to the kids. So we give them 5 items. We make sure that we give them a hearty lunch. So we give a sandwich, fruit, veggies, juice box, and a peanut-free snack. But that way with like the veggies or the fruit and a peanut-free snack, they can always save that for later if they know they might need it for a little bit down the line or maybe later in the evening.
And the way I understand it as well, these kids aren't all dragged into one room and like they're not centered out when they pick up these lunches.
Yeah, so we encourage, I guess the best way to describe it is when you go to pick up your lunch, it looks like a homemade lunch.
Right.
So it comes in a brown paper bag. It's cut up. It's put in Ziploc baggies for the kids. So there's no need or there's no reason for other children to be like, oh, you get one of those lunches. There's no stigma around it. But we also encourage the school to get involved and say, hey, do you have any volunteers that want to help out? And we bring extra lunches for the school, so a handful of extra lunches. So if someone forgets a lunch, there's something there for them. And we just want to make sure that nobody's left out.
Now, Glenn, I have to take pride in the fact that I've brought the two of you together today because you've never met.
No.
I assume that maybe you would have. But it is very important that kids are fed.
No, absolutely. It is critical that happens, and I think we do need programs like yours to be able to help people out on the ground. And I think that there are a number of charities out here really helping out. Our Poverty Reduction Network, one of our main focuses around equity and really sort of looking at that big picture. How can we change policy? How can we get more daycare subsidies? How can we get the government to increase child care benefits? How can we make sure that we have dental programs available, and sort of the youth drug program really can make gigantic steps towards moving people up out of poverty and to be able to self-manage. Poverty
is a difficult topic to tackle because you just brought it up. We can lump in housing, dental care, addiction, employment, employability, healthcare, childcare. All of those things contribute to poverty.
Well, absolutely, and that's what makes it so daunting is that there's no one solution to this. It's a multi-pronged issue that we have to tackle, and then on top of that, there's intergenerational people who've lived in poverty, and how do you get out of that cycle, generation after generation, and how do you get out of that whole mentality of here's our life, here's what our life is like. It's a real challenge for people. So it is very complicated, and I think it's important that we do have a wide range of different people providing a whole range of supports and services here.
Great. Looking at the Niagara Region's website, there's something called the Niagara Prosperity Initiative.
Yes.
And you're involved in that to some degree with Niagara Poverty Reduction Network.
Yes, we are.
Is it a first step in the right direction?
Yes, it's a great program in that the region allocates well over $1 million every year to projects that will help move people out of poverty. So organizations across the region also submit proposals to have different types of programs that range from what you were talking about, housing, food, transportation supports, educational programs, are a wide range of activities that get funded through that initiative. And that, in addition to all the organizations that are out there, really do help to sort of move the marker for us in terms of trying to raise more people above that poverty line.
Back to you, Sarah. Funding. Where does Community Crew get the funding for what they do?
It's a great question. We only have funding from corporate and private donors right now. So we have no government funding at this time. We have had access to small grants, but most of our programs are just funded by private and corporate donors. So it's really, really important to us that we create a sustainable program. So we've actually created something called our social enterprise initiative, and it's through a program with Gift to Greens. So we provide edible microgreens. We go to different type of events, and what we do is for every bag that we sell, we provide 2 lunches back to our program. So we're creating a residual income for us and not just applying for grants because we don't have that government funding yet. But at the same time, we've also created it so other organizations can use it and they can take it out, sell it at their events, sports teams, schools, anybody can use it. A portion of the proceeds will go back to their organization, and then a portion of the proceeds will feed one child in need. So we're creating different income streams like that. So we're not always relying and asking for donations.
You've recently had your 2nd annual gala.
Yes.
As well. That's a big fundraiser.
Huge fundraiser for us. So we focus on 3 main events each year. We do a Night of Miracles gala, which our guest of honor that evening was Kim Coates. We're so honored to have him. We also do a sporting event. So we do a fun bonspiel, which is corporate team building. So a lot of our teams there are from the corporate sector. And then we do a family-friendly day where we give back to the community. So we make sure that families and children are aware of what we do, and all the activities are free. But it's just sort of an awareness piece for our program to, to say, hey, here's what we do. We're here to help. We're here to serve. And so I think for us, we look at it different ways. So we look at how do we be different than other organizations instead of asking for the same revenue time and time again, because we don't want to have to go back to our donors and say, can you give us more money? Can you offer us this? What we're finding as we build our business development team, we have a business development manager, Grant MacArthur, and what we're finding is that sponsors and corporations are coming on board and supporting one school at a time,
right,
1 year at a time, which is so nice for us. And so they look at that as their home school, like how can we feed all these kids for the entire year? But then once they see the work that we're doing, they want to sign in for multiple years. And that's a pride, like a piece of pride for them, because their employees get excited. They're happy to be able to serve, but also to be able to support financially too. So that's a big answer to your question.
But it's a great answer. I want to tie it back into the poverty or prosperity initiative.
Yeah.
Would there be a possibility for Community Crew to put together a proposal to access some of the funds from that initiative?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. NPI does take on a number of different funders. There are a lot of grants in the region, and I think the challenge for everybody is how do you sustain a program? How do you maintain ongoing funding? And that certainly is a challenge. I think corporate sponsorship is great. I think one of the things we've been really working on at the Poverty Network is trying to get more employers to pay a living wage so that we can sort of have, instead of just sort of sponsoring something, they can actually make a big change for their employees by raising more of their employees out of having to live in poverty.
Let's look at that a little bit more closely then. The living wage, because that's the big driver of the NPRN.
That's correct, yes.
And you recently signed, I think, your 12th?
Yes, yeah, we have our 12th organization, Beechwood Donuts, has just come on board this week.
So what does it take? And let's look at the history of the idea of the living wage, because it's a fairly new concept that really hasn't been around for a long time.
That's right. Yeah, it is relatively new. We've been doing sort of a living wage calculation annually for the last few years. And really, it looks at a broad range, sort of a basket of services: housing, rent, transportation, internet connections, what it would take for a family of four to live reasonably well in Niagara region. And each area of the province calculates their own living wage. We've done it this year, and it's come out to $17.99 an hour. And that's based on a family of four with two parents working and having vehicles to be able to move around the region, because obviously we know transportation is a major challenge here for us.
I'm fascinated by the numbers here that are sitting in front of me from your living wage talker, I guess, on your website, the publication. So for this family of four, total family household expenses, $71,000 a year. Yeah. So that's assuming two working parents primarily at $17.99 an hour.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, so it really, for us, it's critical that people can sort of see this, because everybody who's earning less really is spending way too much on rent. People living with ODSP and on Ontario Works, they're only getting less than like that $1,000 range, and rents, one bedroom apartment, $900, stuff like that. So there's really this struggle of people having to rely on charity, having to rely on food banks. While if we can get more and more organizations saying, we're committed to our employees, like Beechwood said, we've done this. It's not it's a good business model because you retain staff.
That's right.
And that
makes your staff happy.
Yeah, and that's part of what we've been talking about. It's a good practice. It keeps retention up, and all of our living wage employers say that. My agency has a 10% turnover rate, and we're a living wage agency, so we do have that stability. But the staff over at Beechwood, the management said, well, it's a no-brainer. We really care about people, and this is what we want for the people that work with us, our friends. And you kind of go, it is a bit of a no-brainer, and why can't we have more of this?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, let's say I run a business and I'm already paying a living wage. Do I contact Niagara Poverty Reduction Network and let you know of that? Can I be the 13th? That's my question.
Absolutely, yes. Or
so there could be some businesses out there that are already paying a living wage, but they haven't been added to that total
they can
of
certainly
12.
be identified, and we have a link on our website to the Living Wage website where you can just sign up. It's an easy process to do, but what it really does show is your commitment to ensuring that whoever you're bringing on is at that level. And there's different stages. Some agencies can't do it. A lot of the charities go, we don't have any money. My agency and most of my programs hasn't had a base increase in our program budget for 10 years.
And sometimes they rely on what grants they might be able to apply for.
Exactly, yeah. So, I think there's real challenges, but it's about how can you start to move yourself in that direction? What little things can you do? Our agency, it took me 3 years to get to be a living wage provider. I had to slowly adjust wages and that kind of thing to get us there, but we're there. And I think that's what we're really trying to encourage organizations to do is look at it. What can you do? Could you even offer benefits to people and make that a little bit easier? It's just a matter of creating this consciousness about it, and really the best way to get out of poverty is to have a higher income and to gain that extra money so that you can spend money. And of course, once you get that, you're going to spend it locally. And that's the other thing. It does stimulate our local economy.
That's right. Is there an official poverty line in Canada?
It's a bit of a moving target for us. They keep setting it and then moving it, and they adjust it with different formulas. So there's a new one coming out based on the latest StatsCan numbers, and I don't have that particular number with me right now.
So the last number that you can remember as the official poverty line?
Oh, no, it's not in my head at the moment, so unfortunately.
In my research, the last thing I could find was for 2015, family of four, $37,542.
Yeah, that's extremely conservative.
That's compared to your calculation of the expenses of $71,000.
That's right.
For that same family.
Yeah. And so a 2015 number is actually using this information from the previous census, which may go back all the way to 2011.
That's right.
So that's how they get so out of date.
Wow.
And that's why we do an annual calculation of living wage.
So how do we move forward then in Niagara? What are we looking at doing? Sarah, do you have ideas? Do you have concepts?
So I think for us, when we look at the program, we say first thing we want to do is feed the children, right? Make sure that they have access to healthy food and then spread that out across the region. So continue to push for funding, but partnerships, and really just make sure that we're serving the kids and knowing that, they have something when they go home at night. They've had at least 2 meals. The other thing that we look at is how can we change their mindset? So originally we talked about generational poverty, and we've seen that in our schools. So we've seen grandparents and parents and then the children come, and we say to them, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And they have no idea of the concept that we talk about. They're like, what do you mean? I'm just gonna collect money and that'll be it. Like they just don't have that idea that, yes, you can do something. So part of our conversations with our board is, do we want to be able to go in and teach them about business, teach them how to run business, teach them about finances, like all those basic things that you want to see in schools or you want to see growing, but maybe they just don't have it in their budget or their curriculum to teach it. So can we as an outside group go in and teach some of those things? So that's down our radar right now.
Glenn, your ideas?
Bang on. I think we're really talking about how do we give people their own skills to get out of poverty, and how do we break this cycle of poverty? For us, we're always looking at, how do we encourage the people living in Niagara to take action? The more you talk to your politicians, the more you raise issues, the more you support, government policy, the more impact you're going to have. And I think part of our challenge in the region is how do we encourage more people, just to do their income tax. Last year, we figured we brought in an extra $3 or $4 million just in income tax that people hadn't applied for. So I think there's a lot of initiatives that agencies can take to really help improve the life and for people, not only at sort of that daily level in terms of what kind of programs can we have, how can we make donations, but also how can we talk to people about changing policy, changing government regulations. There's a review of the ODSP program and Ontario Works programs.
Which both of those programs supplement people far below the poverty line.
Oh, absolutely, they do. And part of the discussion now is how can we make the eligibility for ODSP, which pays a little bit more, a little bit more rigid. Our Ontario guidelines for getting ODSP are easier than if you wanted to get a federal pension. But Ontario is talking about moving to the federal guidelines, which means more people get a cut and have to move back to Ontario Works. So the more we talk about, well, what does this really mean? What are the implications? You know, we're going to force more kids into living in poverty. Like, people aren't going to be able to make ends meet. So they're going to have to rely on your fantastic program you operate, because there is no alternative. So really want people to get out there, be aware of it, talk about it, talk around the table. People say, well, what can we do? Well, you can talk around the table. What can we do as a family? What can we do as individuals? Can we talk to our schools? Can we talk to the, our local politicians? And can we talk to our federal politicians as well? And
housing is a big issue. I know there's a brand new building going up on Carleton Street in St. Catharines, which will be affordable housing. Yeah. Beautiful looking building as well, very modern. There was an announcement today, I believe, or earlier this week, that there's going to be a new building in Welland, 50 affordable housing units in that building. But it's just a drop in the bucket.
Absolutely. And one of the things we're doing at the Poverty Reduction Network is we're actually asking all the municipalities to have a housing plan. The region has one in place, and we're really talking about each of the municipalities to develop their own housing action plan, because a lot of the regulations and guidelines are local. And what you find is a developer will go to one municipality and say, oh, can I do this? I say, well, no, we want some affordable housing. Oh, thank you very much. I'm going over here. Where I don't have that regulation. What we are seeing, which is fantastic, is we are seeing some of the municipalities picking up on this concept and saying, yes, we are going to develop a housing task group. We're really going to look at housing issues in our municipality. And we're really encouraging all 12 municipalities to come on board and develop a plan that dovetails with what the region is doing.
There's a frustration for me. I remember just talking to somebody about a week and a half ago, a family, mother and her disabled child with a disability, being thrown out of their apartment because the owner is selling the house and probably will not have that option to live there. They don't know anything about where to apply for affordable housing, and how do we get the information to people who need it?
It's such a great, it's a great question, because I feel like the answers are there, but they're not as visible as people think. So when I need an answer to where do I apply for a grant, or where do I apply for something?
Well, we think it's all there, because it is all there. It's all there online.
But you got to dig for
do
it.
people really know where to find it?
Right.
And sometimes they don't know their options either. I mean, my mother used to work in law, and she would say to her clients, like, they didn't necessarily know they were entitled to certain things. And she had to sort of update them like, hey, you are entitled to apply for XYZ. And that was so much funding for them. And I remember her talking about a disabled child once, and there was so much funding that they were able to apply for that they had no idea. And they were putting out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And so it's a great question. How do we get that to more people? I think it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we've been really trying to encourage people to do is call 211. They actually have a list of every agency in this region and all the housing providers, and they have a description of services, and that's the important thing.
So someone could call 211, describe their situation, and say, how can you help me?
I'm looking for someone to help me find housing, because the NPI grants, for example, fund a number of housing support workers in different agencies. So it is hard to find somebody that you have to kind of shop around. A good starting point is call 211, have a discussion and say, well, I'm looking for this. And they can actually give you some phone numbers and maybe some connections of who to call in your area, because they actually know who's in each area. So we've been trying to steer people that way, because it is so confusing. And even for us in the business, there's so many players, it's hard to keep track of what everybody's doing and that.
Glenn, we're going to wrap up in a few moments. Can I ask you, do you have some goals for 2019? Do you want to look at 20 living wage employers? Is there a goal in sight for this year?
Well, absolutely. We are seeing a wave of living wage employers coming on board, which is phenomenal. We're wanting to continue that, because for every living wage provider we bring on, we know that there's some employees there that are now living above the poverty line. So it's critical that we continue that momentum. The other piece is we want to involve more community groups, organizations, and citizens in raising issues around poverty. What input can we have into government asking for information on how should social services be delivered? How should we be subsidizing, childcare? How should we be doing these things? If we don't all say something, we say nothing. And I think it's really critical that we at least speak up. And the more people who speak up, the better.
Sarah, your goals for 2019 for Community Crew, more schools on board?
So we have 7 schools right now, and our goal is to be at 10 schools by the end of June. And then we're going to expand out into Fort Erie, Port Colborne, and Thorold in the next 3-4 months in September. What is that? 6 months from now. And so we're going to expand out into those communities in September. So 10 schools by the end of June, and then expand more into those regions.
You'll need more volunteers for that.
We'll need more volunteers. We have some pretty amazing ones, but we'll need some more volunteers for that.
So how can someone volunteer with Community Crew?
They can actually go online, communitycrew.ca, and there's a site form that they can just fill out, and we'll contact them.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, thanks for joining me, both of you.
Yeah.
I knew in our 20 to 25 minutes here we weren't going to solve the problem of poverty, obviously, but it's out there, and the more we talk about it, the more it becomes front and center, and maybe we'll chip away at it over the next little while. Sarah Pertula has been joining us here at Giant TV on Open Mic with Mike Balsam. She's the director at Community Crew, and Glen Walker, the chair of the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network. Thanks for joining us. And as Glen mentioned, if you want information about services for you, call 211. Thanks again.